Welcome to the Better Together Life podcast.
This is the podcast for the suburban family who wants to quit the rat race and return to the land.
I don't know if you know that I'm now putting the thumbnail of you and us, like both of us, in the intro, like up in the corner so that they can see what you do and how excited you get.
How would I know that until you told me right now?
Did I say that you know that? Did you know that I do that?
I don't think you know.
Well, that's why I told you. I just told you that.
Cool.
So like, I don't think I have told you because you haven't seen it, because you haven't been on Abundance Plus and seen the video.
I've been on Abundance Plus for other things. All right. Here's the explanation that you gave me before we sat down. Kelly, we need to finish a podcast that we began 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, longer than that.
All right. So this pickup is coming back to a podcast episode near you. Do we know the podcast number?
No.
Okay. So this is part 2 of Returning to the Land.
Somewhere in between like 9 and 11.
Yeah. So if you're just catching this one,
we're on like the teens. What is it?
If you're catching this one, come back to the first half and then you'll hear the rest of the story right here. And I think it's a really fun story, but I don't know if it's always fun to just tell it straight through. So I'm glad you got this in 2 parts. I think it's going to give you time to go grab a coffee or finish the dishes, whatever you're doing while listening. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the story.
And now it's time for What's New on the Homestead. Okay, babe, before we do the story, part 2, let's do this speedy.
Okay.
What's new on the homestead?
All right. New on the homestead in my book is the most important thing that we've talked about regarding the chicken having a more permanent space. So the chickens right now are in a Premier 1 fencing, and I've been pacing the lines for our new, we were going to call it the chicken summer house, but now it's going to be their winter house, where we're going to put in some more permanent fencing and create one large paddock and eventually put it into quarters so that we'd have fences between, creating 4 different kind of quadrants in this space. And that's important to me because it feels like the next big project. The fun little things we've been doing is just you on a tractor dumping wood chips in all the little spots where we want to catch water or we want to keep the ground from eroding away in the rains. We've had so many rains this summer. So my ticket to what's new on the homestead is the new chicken space, and it's going to house our 50 chickens. 50 chickens.
That's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be great. Do I need to take down the barbed wire in the front?
No.
So I can just put up some kind of wire, some kind of fence there. The most
effective way that we can build anything in this front part of our property, which is it's right on the road. There's a dirt road, so it's not like tons of traffic. It's not crazy busy. But what I really like to do is leave the perimeter fence right now, which is kind of some busted up, rusted barbed wire. And it's been there for sure, at least 30 years.
Yeah.
Longer probably. So thankful that we have any kind of fencing. But what I'd like to do is make a very narrow alleyway. So like 2 to 3 feet wide, and then put the chicken fencing in, because
Really?
I'd like to plant, if we never ever fix that perimeter fence, I'd like to plant grapevines right there.
Well, then why don't we just buy a whole bunch?
Let's do it. Whatever you want. Take my money.
Premier 1 electric fencing and just make that tight. If that's what you want to do, if you're not wanting to actually replace the front fencing.
Because I'm not saying no to replacing the front fencing. I'm also not that into Premier 1.
I know. I'm
just not that into it. Plus, they've had so much back order on their product that at this time.
They have
the tall one is the one you're thinking of?
They have the boring stuff. It's the shocker knot that they don't have.
Well, I'm not against it, but I like the idea of creating a perimeter fence. So,
well, do you want it to be the chicken summer house permanent? It's not even the summer house because we're almost out of the summer house. The chicken permanent space is what I'm at, because the whole point of that was it doesn't really make sense to do what you're doing. I'm sorry, like to do that alleyway, to invest that much money into that, we're adding so much edge to that it really is not going to make a lot of sense. So we could do permanent fencing for the other 3 sides.
Yeah.
And then for that fair. Way across, that we just do electric netting, whether we electrify it or not, but we can just do that until you really decide what we want.
Yeah, I think that's good. What do you see the material being on those permanent sides?
I would assume that it was just regular field fence, like sheep, goat, the squares.
We have that.
Horse fencing is similar to our cheap welded wire that's around the garden, because we just wanted to go cheap for that. But it's strong.
So what? Okay, so
it's like that same design, except it's woven wire.
So you're suggesting for the chicken's actual spot. That's what's new on the homestead as we work all of this out with our audience right now.
That's why it's fun.
It is fun. That your suggestion is the same concept that we have on our garden, which is really just to keep like our chickens, our dogs, our children from going in and running rampant through the garden, which has been a huge success this year. That there is a stronger version of that fencing.
No, that's horse fencing. We're not going to do that. It's horse fencing.
Because it's more narrow? Is that the difference?
Yeah, I don't know why horses need a super small space. I mean, it's a horse, but I just don't understand why they do that.
You're saying small spacing. So let's describe
horse
this.
fencing is these rectangle space, like whole, whatever square, like it's a rectangle thing.
So let's break this down. Most people, like I would think of fencing, privacy fencing, right? These like tall panels or planks that we see in the suburbs.
The cedar planks.
Or I would think of chain link fence. So this is different because why?
Well, I would assume that chain link fence is going to be the most expensive of that, because it is so tight knit and just it's a lot of work to be able to do that.
Seriously.
I mean, Jack Spirko has his entire 3 acres is
chain link. Wow.
I don't know how. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why he bought it. Just is great for dogs.
It was already there. Yeah.
I mean, dogs can't get through there.
Unless you had some of the pound puppies I had growing up.
I mean, they can dig
who
under
got
it.
out of they used to like lift up the chain link gate with their noses.
Sure. They go under it. So then you have barbed wire, of course. Then you have sheep and goat fencing. That is, I don't know the difference really about the sheep and goat fencing versus field fence.
Okay.
I think they're very similar. That's just the squares. So that's, I think, what you like, that look, is you want the square. It's, if you're looking on the video, it's just, just normal squares. They're about like this big. And
does it come on a roll?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've used hog panels in the past. We've used cattle panels in the past for different projects around the property. And then we've used this fencing on a roll that we used for our garden, which I think has been fantastic. But this will be
But that's the cheapest.
Yeah. So you're saying for the chickens, more permanent structure that keeps things out, like predators we don't want in, and keeps the chickens in because it's stronger.
We'll just say
and
this.
It's square paneled instead
heavy.
of.
So like how we could move our garden fence, you can't do that.
It's too heavy. You need it on the back of a truck.
You can't do it by one person. Like the fact that, whenever we were I was talking about buying this fencing at Tractor Supply, there's like, okay, we can help you.
That's right.
Like, you're going to want a truck or a trailer because we're going to slide this thing.
I don't think you know what this is.
Yeah,
this is much heavier.
Can I just get this out myself? I'm like, you're going to want some hands. It's heavy. So that's what.
How did you feel about that? Did it make you feel weak?
No,
Did
it
it
just
make
made
you
me want
feel-
a trailer. Shout out.
It just made me want to buy more things.
Well, let's fast forward this. So one of the things I didn't think that I had one. I think a new thing for me on the homestead is our buddy Josh at Ganderflight. We're gonna be buying some stuff from him.
Yeah,
he's moving. He's gonna go. They're gonna go full time RV. I don't know, maybe a year or so, or just a small amount of time. I don't know. But before they figure out where he wants to land, he really wants to be where it snows. Hey, it snowed in Texas. Come on, Josh. But so I'm going to be buying a small 5x8 trailer from him. I'm excited about that. That will allow us to, yeah. So, we can't do, we could maybe put piglets or something and just, we could do some sort of like hoop housing or something like that. Probably not. Down. Well, I'm just meaning like you could do some things, but some people do that.
It's not a livestock trailer.
It's not, but it's for like us going to go buy fencing, us not having to use my dad's truck. I mean, there's just a lot of usefulness.
Yeah.
We love the truck, but it's not fully ready. It's just a farm truck to be able to load things back and forth. This would be such a help so that we can get some of the fencing things that we need. I can load it up, go take it down to our neighbors if we need to borrow like, the auger or something like that.
Right.
Like there's just a lot of things of having a trailer that we have
and it's not
always
super
wanted.
Huge. Yeah, like it's not real big.
Yeah, and he needs to get rid of it. And we
have need for it.
Yes. So that's the biggest one for me of what is new on the homestead.
Those kind of infrastructure things, stuff that we've done by hand over the last almost 3 years, have really accelerated in like their doability. If that's a factor, if doability is like a thing on the list that helps you produce in your homestead, things have become more doable having the tractor, having a trailer coming up. Even right now, we have a vehicle that can tow, and we didn't have that before we moved to the property. And I think that just those small things make productivity on the property a lot more doable.
Yeah, I don't know what we could have done without having something to tow. I am right now looking up. So we got to figure out when we're going to get the new Cornish cross.
I thought it was
Cornish
September.
Rocks. Yeah, but I'm not seeing it right now. So I gotta check in with Ideal Poultry to see.
Well, I think because our original deal was, or our original agreement was to have a bunch of birds, and then as we were about to have that last round of Cornish rock, we were like, "Hey, I think we're gonna need to split this up. We cannot handle this many birds." Yeah. So we're doing it in the fall. We have learned our lesson. That's coming up on the homestead, a whole new segment, but the new breed of Cornish rock, or the new batch of them, and so much that we learned with this last round. I think that's a whole podcast episode, what we did wrong with our last meat birds and what we're doing right this time. Let's talk about what's growing in our garden. The loofah is popping off in the garden. The watermelon is dying off in the garden. But here is a cool way that God shows just his kindness toward us. So this watermelon patch has been growing and thriving for months in the garden. And then there really wasn't an infestation or anything, but we had a crazy amount of rain, like, I don't know, 10 inches of rain within a week, and then nothing but 95 plus degree temperature and dry for another 2 weeks. And what I read about the damage that could happen to my watermelon came true. And my watermelon the plant had probably a dozen, like 12 good baseball sized watermelons that were growing. But then within a week, every single one of them split and rotted on the bottom. So it was just this black rot right at the blossom end. And the heartbreak of this was some of these watermelons were the size of almost basketballs. So these are large watermelons. They would come out to be about 20 to 25 pounds. And we've harvested 2 of them already this season. But the rest, now the bugs have set in. The garden is telling me the watermelons, they're done. So we're walking through our property, just kind of where we're going to put the chickens actually, and looking to see what does the fence line look like for this. We've already cleared this out because our pigs were here a season ago. So about, fall of a year ago, right? Or 2 years ago. So at that time, the pigs were running through there. It was our very first round of pigs. And after they moved from that space and we rotated them, we threw down seed.
No, the pigs weren't 2 years ago. That was just last year.
Last year, you're right. Well, I'm talking about the time they were in this one specific spot.
I mean, maybe 14 months ago.
Yeah. So just a little over a year.
16 max.
So in this spot where we're going to be putting the chickens, it's been a while since the pigs have been there, but we noticed some cover crop was coming up that we'd sown, these beans, legumes that were just looking to be nitrogen fixers in this spot. So it's really cool as you start to rotate your animals that you have this chance to then follow up with seeds if this space is going to be fallow for a bit. Don't do it if your chickens are just going to scratch it up. But we knew we weren't putting chickens there right away. So we threw out some cover crop, and those beans, sure enough, are just popping up everywhere. We also had several mounds, very large mounds of wood chips placed in this same area. So if you can imagine this, it is wooded, but not densely wooded. It has probably about 30 feet from our property line toward the house, and then another, acre or two going the opposite direction. So we have a really good space here. It's very large. We've cleared the lines for where the fence will go because the pigs were there and we had fencing in for them. So as we're climbing up
back to the garden, baby.
We're climbing up to the top of these wood chips. We see the beans, but then we see something else and we think, is that a watermelon plant? And then as we're walking over the mound, because these are huge mounds, they're taller than me and I'm only 5 foot, but huge mounds. And I'm looking over and I see a watermelon the size of, I don't know, larger than our barred rock rooster, growing in the sticks, literal pile of sticks. This watermelon is growing through it. And then we look around a little bit further and there are 3 other watermelons growing right there over the wood chips. And I really think that this came from the pig poop. So 14 months ago, as pigs are running through here and we're feeding them watermelon rinds and giving them leftover watermelon that had just kind of not tasted as great as we wanted it to. And we did not plant any watermelon when we broadcast these seeds after they had moved on. So where my garden is totally failing, and I have tended that thing, I have loved on those plants, I have sung out in that garden, and I walk over a mound of wood chips to find just a sweet, sweet replacement for all the failure that happened in the garden. Or really not failure, but just seasonal shift in the garden. And there on the mound was watermelons. And that is what's happening in the garden.
Okay, here we go. So main topic, part 2 of us returning to the land. I'm going to do a quick little recap of the part 1. So we talked about why we bought land. We talked about the story of us finding the property, the story of us going to go look at the property, actually buying the land, and then the marriage conflict of you and I, which we've talked about so many times here on our channel, everywhere. And then we had Finley. I don't know if we went over a ton about Finley. So let's talk about it a little bit. So just really fast. We finally got to the point to where we were traveling a little bit where we didn't have pets or anything. And it was just us 3. We went to New Mexico a couple of times, and you started to get the mindset of, okay, maybe we can do this RV thing.
Yes.
Which I had really no idea. This is all new to me that you were really considering this possibility. And then we went on our anniversary trip. Yep. And a couple of weeks later, we found out that
Finley's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we're like, nope, we're not moving. We're not selling the house. We're not moving. We're not doing anything.
We pumped the brakes and we didn't say no to having this dream on the homestead. We just said, hey, we still want to do this, but let's be wise about that choice. So instead of like, hey, we're going to just come revisit this later, we still had a lot of conversations during my pregnancy with Finn that were completely centered around moving to the homestead. We had a lot of conversations about what it would look like, even to what we would live in. So is it a barn dominium? Is it an RV? Are we building a house like bricks and sticks? A lot of conversation around that. And those still happened during pregnancy. So the aim was always to move. It just had some contingencies. So we could move if we had a healthy baby. We could move if we were able to sell this house. We could move if we had all of the T's crossed and I's dotted to close things out in Katie beforehand. But there were still so many unknowns until Finley arrived. And after she arrived, she actually needed some extra work. Like she had a tongue tie and we needed to have that revised, and we needed to make sure that she was going to get the care that she needed to recover from that. So there were a lot of little hurdles, nothing major, no hospitalizations, but every time I'm pregnant, I know that I am not in control of the outcome of that birth or the health of my children. I am just going to wait and be patient while all of that unfolds.
Well, how much I wanted to homestead. I wanted baby number 4.
Yeah.
Like once we found, that's just how, like once she was a complete surprise and we were so excited. We're like, okay, God wants us to have another baby number 4. I want baby healthy. I want wife healthy. That's the only thing that I care about.
There was so much more tension between us before we ever got pregnant with Finley, and that big kind of explosion of where are we in your dreams versus, hey, Finley's put a pause on this. Yeah. There was so much more for us to work out as a married couple that this was like cake. This was like, oh my goodness, we're having a baby. We're stoked about her coming. But it took a minute to
we didn't know it was
shake that out.
Yeah.
It took a minute.
I don't remember it taking, we were just in shock. So
that's what I mean. I didn't expect
for like the first month
to have Finn. And then I'm nothing but excitement. And she is a riot. You never know what to expect from her. She will throw you a wild card at every turn.
Well, speaking of wild cards, then soon, I don't know how far after she was born.
3 months.
She was 3 months old. Mm-hmm. So we start getting some things ready. Probably the, last trimester, mm-hmm. we really kind of started to ramp up downsizing, getting the house ready. Because we were like, hey, we're going to sell our house with a newborn.
Garage sales.
Yeah. We were
throwing things on Craigslist, putting it on the curb, everything to minimize what we would have to move with.
Yeah, we found a realtor, we talked, and then she gave us about the mm-hmm. good month. She said, maybe end of summer, beginning of fall, like new mm-hmm. school season, like that's a decent time to sell a house. The best time is in the big, at the end of a spring semester, like before in the summer. She said, but this is not a bad time and you're set up good. So that's what we wanted to do is beginning of the fall. Mm-hmm. And then we lived in the outside of Houston mm-hmm. and Katy, Texas, where we were living, especially Katy, got smashed, devastated by Hurricane Harvey. And I remember calling our realtor and said, it was a couple of days after, the crazy thing is we documented all of this on the YouTube channel. Like we ended up putting out 4 videos within that span. It was scary. And I remember calling our realtor. This was after and just saying, hey, what does this mean mm-hmm. for selling the house? She said, Bo, I have no idea. She's like, there is so much devastation mm-hmm. here. Luckily, what we found out is that instead of it hurting our chances, somehow it helped it because every single house that did not
flood,
it it raised the property value.
Yeah. So this is 2017 and the market was fine. It wasn't, significantly heavy on a buyer or a seller's end. And when Hurricane Harvey hit, Houston had a lot of flooding and damage. We're used to that when it comes to hurricanes. We batten down the hatches when it comes to hurricanes, meaning like we're throwing just parties. Like everybody's off of work. We're sitting in our lawn chairs. We're watching the wind come through. And then as the storm rages, we'll usually hang out inside. All of us have a basic emergency preparedness. All of us have flashlights. All of us have a little food stored away. Like there's, not a ton of stuff, but like you've got some applesauce and peanut butter and a loaf of bread. Like that's what you do to get ready.
You say
for
all
a storm.
of us. I would
here's what I'm
say
saying.
no.
So like very basic things. So all of us, especially on our block.
You mean like Miller Lite? Like
yes,
that's what the most of our
like we're ready to hang because that is what hurricanes do to our area. You lose power for a while. Sometimes you're inconvenienced by water, but this is what we were preparing for. And the storm passes. The storm passes within a few hours. So you may have a lot of rain and a lot of wind, and it's not nothing. It's just how it affects Katy, which is further inland from the coast. We experience some dirty sides of the storm, and that's about it. That is not what happened with Harvey. With Harvey, this became a tropical storm, back to a hurricane. It stalled over our city, and the way that these areas were built was just a tragedy. It was
greed.
There's tons that you can learn about how this all went down, but it was absolutely tragic to the point that some of our friends had over 6 feet of water in their homes, and it was not because this storm flooded their house, but because their neighborhoods were flooded to prevent a break in the levee of the dam where our whole water reservoir is. So as a city, it was built fine, but then so many people came, it became this real hazard. Praise the Lord that our home was not destroyed at this time. Our block did not flood, but literally around the corner, we're walking. doTERRA was so gracious to us. They sent truckloads full of these hygiene kits with some oils and some basic things like toothbrushes, washcloths, soap, that kind of stuff. And we could walk our neighborhood and just give these kits out to people because their entire house was on their front lawn. Their floors, their carpets, their appliances, refrigerators were floating through houses. And the fear that gave us was not just the security of our house and our home. We have friends who left their neighborhoods either on boats, small fishing boats that people brought in and rescued them. Another friend rode a jet ski through neighborhoods to rescue people out of their homes. Other friends were carried away on giant military vehicles out of their neighborhood, and we were expecting that to happen to us. So there's a whole nother podcast on preparedness, and we'll talk about what we actually had to put into practice. But that is the depth of the shaking that happened at that moment, where we were just then very sidetracked from the homestead and thinking, how are we going to get our family out? And as soon as that storm had cleared, I remember sitting in our house with the door open, and it was the Monday after all of the storm had come through. Sunday was a really intense night, and the wind was cool, and there was a small breeze. The rain was still coming down, but very light. It was just almost like having a moment to not panic. That's really what it was. It wasn't even like a reflective moment. We were just, wow, I can exhale right now. And I had coffee. Actually, I think it was even in this same cup. I had coffee in my mug and just sat there thinking, okay, we're putting all our plans on the table, and God, you show us what to do next. That's when you called our realtor. She said, I can't tell you anything. But the houses that didn't flood were in higher demand because now these people whose homes were ruined were displaced. So the value of our home had gone up just because
there were less houses and
the demand was higher.
To where everybody was scared of, I mean,
So we did everything.
You don't buy a house that is flooded in 100-year flood. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that the market has recuperated and that some of those homes are being sold now, but nowhere to the value that it once was. I don't know if those values will ever come back. But so that's Harvey. It was big.
Harvey was significant.
And it allowed us to see how little people were prepared. Like you're saying, and I said Miller Lite like a joke.
No, that's
we
fair.
didn't have Miller Lite prepped. No. We did have some wine, but most of the people, they think of it as a party.
Yeah.
And whenever I went, and I have it on video on the channel of me driving the streets and seeing what it's like, and I saw the grocery store and the just lines.
Well, no one could drive their 18-wheelers to get to the grocery store to deliver more. And there was a deep heartbreak, but also the most beautiful, unified community. Like, I could cry thinking about that. It was moving. It was transformative to see how the community of Katy, Texas, and Houston as a whole really took roles and deferred to one another to make sure that people were clothed, to make sure that people had transportation from their homes, like the edges of their neighborhood. We had friends who organized and took their minivans and shuttled people from the edge of their neighborhood where the water met its end and drove them to a shelter in a high school that came up out of nowhere. It was fantastic and beautiful and moving in the midst of grief. So we didn't mean this podcast to be about our post-Harvey memories or reliving that, but that it was a significant piece of our story to move to the homestead was this halt that we had in our plans. And we had to lay everything down that we had planned and instead be really present in the moment and go and muck out people's homes. Like, you were there and I'm spraying everything down with On Guard when you come home because our friends were getting E. coli and salmonella poisoning from rescuing people from their homes and cleaning things out. And there was just so much happening at that time that it is really significant to our story. But after that, as so much was still recovering, even around Christmas time, we made the decision to list the house in November. And it showed real well. I think we had, was it over 20 showings? We had over 20 showings in just a few days. Our realtor was fantastic. She was so loving and patient with our kids.
There was a spider on me.
You just had a spider on your arm and you casually flung it away.
Well, country life, baby.
Country life.
I thought it was a fly. I was like, you were just sticking on me.
Persistent fly. Our realtor was fantastic. She really knew the market. She was excellent in showing and got loads of people in our home. We had several offers. It was at one point people offering more than the other just so that they could get into our home. Through a series of unfortunate events, this did not get sold in November. I think it's too many details to share other than...
No, you went through all the detail of the heart. Listen, you cried. I'm going to give my details.
We had a buyer on the house to the point that they'd put in all their earnest money. They had their inspector come. We were getting out of the house. Bo was out of town and I had all 4 of the kids, including this like 3-month-old infant. Maybe she was 5 at that point. And we were getting out of the house and it was like the bottom fell out and then sucked us out of whatever happy little space we were in. At this inspection, it was supposed to last 2 hours. I had to get all my kids out of the house at the time. The oldest was 6. The youngest was a few months old. We go to a Chick-fil-A and within seconds, and I mean seconds of the arrival, the oldest child trips in the Chick-fil-A in the playground, lands on his ear on the playscape. And I'm sitting there like, you've got to be kidding me. I just get all of these children out of the house in time for this inspection.
Like busted his face.
Sliced the ear. The cartilage is like it's just like in half. And I'm thinking, oh Lord, I'm going to have to take all these children to the emergency room for him to get stitches. My husband is out of town. Someone is at my house. This is ridiculous. So we're at the Chick-fil-A. They're super friendly, obviously, because Chick-fil-A is the world's greatest institution and gift to man. And then they give them all ice creams as we're waiting. And then Everett's sad because he wants to eat the ice cream, but his ear hurts. And it's just like an emotional collapse. So finally, I just like pull the plug. I don't even get our food.
Well, hold on. This is so I have to interrupt because there's two parts of the story. You were there.
Yes.
The other part of the story is that I am at Jack
You were
Spirko's.
not.
That's hilarious. Like I could completely understand.
Yeah, I am alone, friends. I am entirely abandoned.
But I am up in Dallas at Jack Spirko's The Survival Podcast workshop, and I am hyping this up.
Yes.
Of saying
we're selling our house. We're moving to our homestead.
It's all going to go on YouTube. Like this is going to be everything. Like we are getting our home inspection right now. As I speak. Like this is it. We got the money. We're full asking price. I think it even went over
It was over asking because there was a little bit of a bidding war.
Yes. Like all of this awesome stuff. And then the texts start coming in.
Yes. So I leave the Chick-fil-A. I can't remember if I got our food. Maybe I did. And I'm taking us to a park because these things can last 2 hours. I have a newborn. I'm like postpartum sweating like a beast. I stink. My child's ear is not so bad, but it is not good. And then everyone else is mad because we couldn't play at the Chick-fil-A park at the Chick-fil-A playground. So I take them to a nearby park. And Finley needs to nurse because they woke her up in the car as we got there. They go out to play, and within seconds, somebody's like, Mom, I need to go to the bathroom. This is a neighborhood park.
Why didn't you just go to Carrie's?
There is no potty. I don't know. I obviously was not in my right mind. I'm like, I have to call my realtor. And find out. And I explained the whole thing. I'm like crying on the phone. I'm like, can I please just go back to our house? We can hide in one room or something. Like, is there a way that you can connect with the realtor? So she connects with the realtor and calls me back in minutes, less than a minute. And she says, oh, they're already done. And we'd been gone for 30 minutes. And I was like, oh no, what happened that they're already gone? So I get home, I unload all the children. I'm pretty sure I had to like change my shirt. I was just sweaty and gross. I probably had baby fluids on me. Like
you text me saying, babe, they were only here for 30 minutes.
Yes. And you were like explicative text, angry emoji face.
Because I knew that there was something.
Something went wrong.
And then our realtor calls me. So I'm at the workshop. I'm like, all right. I think I probably texted her saying like, hey, I know that it went short. Mm-hmm. Just tell me whenever you're ready. Kelly's swamped. So just call me.
Fill me in.
And she basically said so the potential buyers, they recognized you.
Yeah.
Y'all go to the same church and they feel very, very bad and they want to explain it. But here's the thing. You cannot explain this. Because they say they want to send the inspection report because they want to prove that they're not bad people.
Well, because they'd sent us this like emotional letter.
Well,
saying we know you and we see having Bible studies in this home. And I don't blame them. They had just lost their home to a flood.
They lost their home to a flood. So they were very
emotional.
They were definitely Ross Perot buyers. That I know, we should have seen like, we're in, we're out. Nope, we're back again. Nope, I'm gone.
Yeah,
again.
we should have just cut ties.
Yeah, so
for our own sanity.
And they eventually, oh my God, this is the second one.
Yeah.
Remember we had a first buyer.
A cash offer.
We had a first buyer that was a loan offer. And their loan fell through.
Yeah.
We sold our house.
Right.
Yeah. So this was the second time that we were selling
within
our
a
house.
month.
And all of the inspections.
Yeah.
No, wait, the other one never made it to inspection, I don't think.
This was a this might even have been a second inspection.
But basically, what they ended up finding out, one, was that there was a major repair that needed to be done.
Yes.
And the inspector somehow found that needle in the haystack. And every time I tell somebody, every time like I've talked to an inspector, we actually had to hire an inspector under the table to be able to like find out what it was, because how it works at least in Texas is if you get an official inspector, all of that becomes public knowledge.
Right.
And so we had to like figure out how to do it without it being public record.
Yeah, the inspection that fell through with these buyers, they walked through the house and they noticed a symptom of a problem. So we had to get someone in to diagnose what the actual problem was. And that was where we had someone who's an experienced inspector come not as an official inspector and just like say, hey, I would fix these lights. I would change these light switches. I would, change this hinge on the door. And then here's what I've diagnosed as a larger problem. So he was able to do that for us. He was actually really helpful on a lot of the small repairs that
he was excited about it. He was like, can we take this apart? Cause I'm never allowed to do this. And basically we found out that there was a cracked pipe underneath the master tub. And so that thing needed to be repaired, and it somehow was overflowing through an overflow crack of the foundation. Like they make it so that this would,
to do that.
But there's no way that anybody would have ever, like the inspector that found it, he didn't even know what it was.
No.
So because you can only see the symptom of the problem.
Right.
So basically, long story short,
they turned on all the water in the house. And then walked around the house while the water was flowing down the drains.
All
and
we
that's
knew
how they
at that time, so we didn't know what the issue was until we hired a contractor to figure out what it was going on. But the information that the buyer got me was that there was water coming from the foundation. And then also, there was like two things.
It was ridiculous.
There was water coming from the foundation. I didn't know what to think of that. The second thing they said is everything in the house was crystal clean, perfectly clean.
Yeah, because we paid somebody to clean it.
And then we went to go look in the oven and it was dirty.
Yes.
And we thought, what else are they hiding?
I was through the roof. I was like, someone had to come get me. I was outraged because we had made a lot of concession out of concern for this family's situation. We knew that they had just lost their home. They wrote us a letter talking about just how important this was to them. I was a worship leader at our church, and it wasn't a huge church, but it was a large church. And they kind of took that like distance. We still don't know to this day who we are. And it's probably a mercy that we don't.
Well, we don't know who they are.
Right. But they kind of manipulated that in a letter form. And I really do want to give them the benefit of the doubt that it was just very emotional for them, and they had a heart's desire to have a home. And who doesn't feel that way? Who doesn't feel like they just want a home? They
had PTSD from losing their house in a flood. And
absolutely.
I don't know how they got out from underneath their flood,
I don't know.
The house, So anyway, that killed it. It was done.
It was straight up dead. There was no pulse on that.
So our realtor said, "So what do you want to do?" And I said, "I'm done." Nope. I was like, we're taking it off the market. And we talked to her and we counseled. She said, we're going into the low season of this.
It's just before Thanksgiving, just before Christmas, just before New Year's. You will be more stressed to keep this on the market and have random showings from probably less committed buyers than if you wait until the new year.
So we took it off the market and we were going to put it back on in, May.
Yeah, I think it was like late April we were eager. We were really eager to get it back on the market in the spring, but we made an intentional decision to enjoy the time that we had in our home and with our friends and not be rushed.
Well, you started calling it
our goodbye season.
Yeah. Or maybe we did that prior.
No. We did not.
Really? So we were because of Harvey and because of Finley and Harvey, we didn't have that. And I think that was definitely God's grace to be able to give both of us that. Like you were able to have the goodbye season. Is that what you said? You called it the goodbye semester because you knew this.
Yeah.
You were in the Army and you moved every 2 years or so. So you had said goodbye so many times, and you just knew the pace of needing the space. You knew the pace, but you knew that you needed the space to make the rounds, to do what you wanted to be able to have closure in that. And for me, this was, of course, after we went to marriage counseling, because we found out that I wasn't able to be content and happy with anywhere that I was. And this forced me, and it didn't really force me. It just gave me permission.
It's like an invitation to have a different perspective.
Yeah. That I didn't need to chase this dream right now. And I remember saying, like, of telling Kelly, I was like, all I want to do is just build this Lego robot with my son. I just want to, like, it was, Everett got this coding Lego robot. I forgot what it's called, Lego Boost. And it was so much fun doing this with him.
He was 6.
Yeah. It was just a blast.
You were his best friend.
Yeah.
His favorite person.
We did not make a whole lot of videos during this time. We kind of shut that down. We did breed the rabbits, and I remember I called it, I kind of took advantage of Lilac, our doe, and I did anger breeding with her in terms of, I was so mad. I was like, I just want to go breed my rabbits. And Kel was like, okay.
I was like, is this a good emotional state?
I'm like, yep.
But what was good was she was ready to be bred. And
they're always ready.
Well, and then we got to watch her have these babies, and we were able to share those bunnies with other people and really cut our teeth on a very simple homestead practice without sort of the urgency. Like, we've got to learn this before we get out there. Everything slowed down. Everything became more of a savoring than a rush. It gave our kids a gift of time and us a chance to say goodbye to things that had really been formative for us. I mean, we got married there. We had our babies there. We watched them walk there. So many things that are really not stuck. Branded in your mind. That's how significant that season was for us leading up to the move.
So returning the land it's a process for everyone. And this is just definitely ours. And then,
and I think I would say it's a process regardless. So if you're trying to avoid the things in the city, all your stuff is going to come with you, and you're going to have to deal with it in the country. And I am so thankful that we got to deal with a lot of that mess in ironing things out before we made our move, because there was plenty of conflict once we made the move that would have been potentially devastating to our family if we had not dealt with a lot of the triggers, but also like what was under the surface, what was causing those emotions or those outbursts before we moved.
We also we were successful with building doTERRA during that season. I remember, like, we were able to kind of more focus on that, to redo that and to rebuild some of the foundations there. So that was good. And then we just out of the blue, like in March.
Yeah,
like
we were outside cleaning
it was probably April.
The gutters.
Yeah.
We had just spent the morning cleaning the gutters, and the kids and I were outside, and this couple walks by. And our for sale sign was not up in the front anymore, but it was on the side of the house. And this woman just says, "Hey, is your house for sale?" I said, "It's actually not right now, but it will be in a couple of weeks, like 6 more weeks, I think." And she said, "Oh, we're looking for a house. We'd like to look at your house." And I said, "Well," and got smart, "here is the number for my realtor. She would love to talk with you about it."
See, I'll say that now that I've done it, I'm like, I could have done it myself. I know. Kelly's rolling her eyes on the video. This is where, it ended up working. So long story, really fast. we ended up selling our house for $20,000 more than we originally listed it for because of the fact that, and we never had to put it on the market.
The second time.
Yeah. They ended up they wanted the house.
They negotiated.
And it got
at
down
the
to the
last minute. And that was one of those things that we just had to learn. This is how you play the game. We'd never sold a house before. And it was, we'd give them a deadline, and it was within 30 minutes of that deadline's expiring that they would.
Well, they kept on trying to negotiate down. I was like, and I said, no, I'm putting it on the market tomorrow morning. We are ready. We're going to list it tomorrow, and we're going to get out of the house and get some showings. And it was just before midnight or whatever. And they said, fine, we will take the offer. Mm-hmm. And it was a good offer. It was great. The inspections was not that bad. Mm-mm. Very minor repairs. We had already done so much work the first time. And then we ended up closing May 31st, the last day of May, right?
Yes.
And that last month, we decided to get the storage unit. And that was just a lot of help.
A full-time job.
Oh, yeah.
Was every day taking something to the storage unit. I feel like we were in that mode of living in different spaces for the next 2 years, because we then lived in Dallas, and then we lived here and had a storage unit. And there was a very distinct shift in that season where we went from like, everything is very simple, everything is very convenient, to holy cow. Our life just got spread out real far, real fast. And that was having that unit in Katie was kind of a mind twister for me.
Okay, so I don't want to have 3 part 3s.
Yeah.
On this one. So let's kind of plow through this and
take it home, babe.
Well, I just if there's something you're like, we need to talk about this, we can go down deep on it.
Yeah.
But so we ended up, we sold the house.
Yes.
And we were homeless. And I really thought of it. I was like the scene in Finding Nemo, to where it's the ending credit scene, to where all the fish that were in the aquarium at the dentist's office, and they find a way, they do their master plan, and they get in the bubble bags, and they swim across the freeway, and then they end up in the ocean. And they're all sitting there rejoicing and in the ocean, floating in their little water bubble bags. And like, yeah, we did it. We escaped. And then the pufferfish goes, now what? Like you're
that's fair.
Like you did all this work and you're like, yes. And you're like, oh man, we're homeless. Like we didn't really understand what to do. Like we had
were
land.
Couch surfing.
Yeah, we had land. We had no deal for the shed to house. Mm-hmm. Like it was just talked about, but there was nothing really finalized. And so we really were a little scared. Mm-hmm. The only thing that we knew is that we had a storage unit in Katy, Texas. We had a truck full of 2 cars. We had a truck and a car full, because we only had 1 car at the time,
right?
Full of the stuff that we knew that we couldn't do without. And we knew that your parents in North Dallas,
5 hours away,
they had a house, they had a space, they had a room, and they were ready to welcome us to stay there for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. And so that's those couple of months ended up being 6 months. Mm-hmm. How did you feel?
Almost to the day.
Yeah.
It was, I think, either 6 months shy or 2 weeks shy of 6 months, or 6 months, 2 weeks. May to
mid-November. Oh, like beginning of June to mid-November.
Yes. So these are my parents. So for me, it felt very comfortable. It felt very much returning to home. We moved so often as a kid that our home has always been where our people are. So my parents' home, that's only been their home for 10 years, has been very familiar to our family. It was not a scary, sad, heartbreaking thing. My prayer before moving there was, Lord, let this be the best season of life for both of us, for my parents and for our kids and us. And it really was.
I agree.
It was a fantastic
so good.
space. We did a few things to make sure that we weren't creating stress or tension, because that can happen when you have 4 small children in a home that never has kids in it. You know, like this is not a regular occurrence to have screaming and kicking and tantrums and also glitter. Those are the things that we just wanted as a couple, is to be prepared to mitigate before that got there, but also give room for our kids to play. So there was a fantastic yard. There was a pool. There was amazing meals, because when your mom cooks for you, it tastes a billion times better than when you make it. That it really was the absolute best experience that it could have been. Just a sweet relationship time with my parents. Really, our kids learned to ride their bikes at my parents' house. And a lot of swimming and fun time together, and really sweet memories where even now, it's been 3 years since we moved away. And when we turn the corner onto their house, they're like, oh, it just feels so good driving on this street. So I think the mission was accomplished, that it was a good 6 months together. We actually bought a gym membership there just so that we could work. We would send our kids to the childcare for 2 hours.
For probably, what was it, like 2-3 months?
Yeah.
Did we ever work out once?
No, I didn't even, like at one point I just started wearing jeans. I was like, can we not pretend that I'm actually going to go up to this cardio room? Because I'm not.
Did we even, like, we never even walked around? I mean,
I'm sure you did.
Did they have a pool?
They had everything, but we didn't go to the pool.
Because we had a pool at your parents'.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, we did not.
Well, it was the best way to get a babysitter for our kids, and the best way for us to get work done. It was actually more cost effective to do this than otherwise. And it was a gym that we'd had in Katy. So there was no big deal to be like, oh my gosh, we're signing up for a gym. But it was hilarious. Like, no, I have zero intention of working out. No. I am definitely not even walking up the stairs to get to the workout equipment.
Yeah. Hey, if there's a Lifetime Fitness, that's the gym down here in Texas, and you just need office hours, you need a babysitter.
Highly recommend it.
It is the cheapest babysitter that you can get.
So great.
Because you can get them every single day.
Yep, for 2 hours.
For 2 hours. I think you can even get them like if you can get 4 hours if you come twice a day. I think they're allowed to come twice.
Yeah.
But that was the full 6 months. Tell me about the 6 weeks that I was not there and I was living in the wooden box.
While you were down at the shed, we had a stomach bug. We had lots of little things, just like emotional behavior. Up? I didn't. The kids all did.
Okay.
And then like Ella threw up. One of the kids threw up Cheez-Its all over the couch. It was just one of those things, but that didn't happen at the beginning of the 6 weeks. I think being apart for 2 weeks was no big deal. Getting to 3 weeks was no big deal. I think we even saw each other at week 4. And then I took all the kids back up to Dallas. But those last 2 weeks was like as if we had been burning the candle at both ends. And then we got to the middle of the candle and I was burnt out.
You came to see the house and to stay.
Yes.
I forgot why we ended up doing that.
I think we just needed to see each other.
And there was the tension there.
Yes.
We could both, I mean, we weren't really fighting at each other. We were just fighting at the issue, what we were dealing with.
Both of us felt the strain of our individual situations. Me with the kids and you here having to run everything. We both had the strain of our own situations. And then when we were together, it felt like the other was not meeting our needs. So it was like, you had your own situation where if I had just come in and like known how to love you in that, I could have served you well and it would have felt like you were seen and cared for and a partner. And the same thing was happening to me. You had no clue, not because you were a jerk, but because you couldn't have any clue. And the communication was strained because of the internet service, because of the phone service. We just really couldn't communicate in any way. I remember having a Zoom with you and I was just, I hung up. And that's very rare. I mean, I cannot even count on one full hand how many times in our marriage that I've just left. And I was like, I'm done. I'll talk to you another time. And I hung up. And I was like, so much cussing.
So then you came to the property, and I remember it was like you were going to stay for 2 or 3 nights. Mm-hmm. It was probably just 2 nights, I would imagine.
In the house.
In the house. Well, we had the styrofoam, or no, we had the drywall by then.
Yes, the spray foam was in, the drywall was in. There was no texture on the walls.
Yes. So, but that kept Finley from eating the spray foam.
Yes, which was like a major goal. We were like, we have to have the walls up because it's just not safe for Finley.
We had the window unit to where we could get some sort of air circulation going.
And it was October.
Yeah, so it wasn't horrible, but that was it. And I remember you looking at it was time to kind of like it was the morning of the day of like it was time for you to start getting ready and getting the mind ready to leave. And you just looked at me and you said, "The boys are staying."
Yep.
And I was like, what?
Yep.
Oh, I think I was like, I don't even think I said what. I was like,
Okay.
Okay.
You're like, this was not even a question. You just said it. And I'm not going to argue.
Yeah.
We had a little 2-tier, like a bunk bed, a cot bunk bed. I don't know if that's a good description, but it's bunk beds made out of cots. And it's a kid's thing from the grandparents. It's like a real thing. We didn't just like rig it up. But these 2 cots that make a bunk bed.
They're like portable. Yeah.
Yeah. Camping. Camping bunk beds for kids. So they were super stoked to do that. They also got to eat so much junk food. They were like in heaven. They thought this was the coolest thing. But
there was friends. The couch family was here. So they said they had friends that they could hang out with.
I needed some of the pressure relieved and to be able to leave the big boys because Ella was not even 4 yet. Was she? No, she was. She was just 4 at that time.
Yeah.
So I had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old.
It was not bad for me to do it, but that leads to the biggest moment that I have had in this entire thing. I was there with my boys, and it was the last night, and we also had the pressure that I had already signed up for Jack Spirko's next, because that was the 1 year after that, the next workshop. And I was planning on going to that as well. And I got the dates wrong by 1 week.
Yes.
And I was like, oh no.
I have to be there sooner.
I have to tell Kelly about this. And I was like, hey, I'm sorry I had the dates wrong. It actually is in 2 days. And I got off the phone with you, and then I realized, and it was at the moment, the boys were there, they were having fun, they were really loving it. And the electrician was here. Andrew and the crew, they were building the decks, and the electrician was here to do the finish electric, and the fans turned on. The fans were installed, the fans were turned on, and the lights started coming on. We had electricity inside of the house
for the first time ever.
And the mini splits were installed. I think.
Yes.
I think they were.
They were.
Like the house was coming alive and it was working. And I remember like the boys were celebrating so much. They were so excited. Like, Dad, this is awesome. We have fans. We have air conditioning. We have lights. They were like flipping the switch.
Yes.
We have lights. And I thought, I hate it here.
I know.
I don't want to be here anymore. I remember thinking, this is not my home.
You were burnt.
Yeah. And I was like, my wife is not here.
Right.
This sucks. I don't want to do this. Like, I want my family back. It was so deep and so hard. And I think I just knew.
It was dark.
Yeah. I was just like, I need my wife back. Like, Kelly and I need to be back together. We need to figure this out. And so then I ended up, we met up. So the next morning we met up at some sort of restaurant
to exchange the children.
And it was still not great. It was still bad. Like you were glad for going to eat, but you knew that I was still going to be gone for a couple of more days. And I ended up skipping the workshop. I left like a day early. I couldn't do it anymore, and I wanted to surprise you a little. Like I just wanted, and even the surprise wasn't all that good. Like you weren't even all that excited to see me. I remember that.
I think you had some unrealistic expectations. I think your expectation was like, I will be the knight in shining armor. And I'm like, bro, we still have to pack up this house.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I don't think you see the work that is going on here. And it wasn't that you didn't. You did see the work. And I didn't feel unappreciated. My head was down, and this is how I always am. In the crisis, I will not fall apart. In the crisis, I will keep it together. I will get us through the tunnel. I will not stop. I will not turn the car around. I am stalwart in a crisis, and we were in crisis. And then after it, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to crumble like a gingerbread house. I am going to not even be able to verbalize my needs or my feelings. I am a mess. I am worse than a mess. I am a steaming pile of regurgitated garbage mess. Does that make sense? Like that's how regurgitated garbage mess. Like I am a mess. There is not a box of Oreos large enough to fix that problem. So,
but then we took the kids.
Yes.
To your sister's.
Yes.
And we had our anniversary celebration.
Yep.
Here.
Yep. It was all very quick. So we moved out of the house in Dallas. My parents weren't even in town that weekend. We just packed up, left them some love notes. They knew we were leaving. It wasn't like we ditched them. But we packed up all our belongings in Dallas, came down to the shed, unloaded all the kids. We all slept in the living room on their mattresses, because one of the smart things we did was had these IKEA mattresses, and we took them up to Dallas. That's where the kids slept, so they would have something of their own. And then we brought those down here, and we all slept in the living room on their mattresses, which was so wonderful to have. We still had those little bunk bed cots that were just up in the corner that became our couch sort of for a few months. It was weird. And as the kids went to my sister's, we drove directly down to Houston, grabbed a bunch of stuff from our storage unit.
Not a bunch, everything.
Oh, we did. We had a big
We rented a U-Haul moving truck.
Katy.
And we loaded
everything. Whole thing up.
And we moved it into a store, because we had 2 storage units at one time. We had one here at our land, like in the town, and then we had that one. So we got rid of that one and moved it all up.
All the Katy stuff up, literally backed the truck up to our porch and loaded in our bed and our furniture, and some things still stayed on the front porch for a few months, and then took the rest down to the storage unit nearby. And this became the home. This was like saying goodbye to our house in Katy. I remember that feeling of walking through at the end and saying, it's not our house anymore. Like, this is not that emotional for me. It's not our house anymore. I've already grieved this. I've already been grateful for this. Moving into the shed felt like probably the same way the boys felt. Flipping those light switches on and off was like, oh, this is home. I remember this. I remember what it feels like to have a home and kind of, mark it up yourself. This is where the furniture goes. Here's where I keep my dishes in this drawer. This is my bedroom, my bathroom, things that feel like you again. And that was a relief and kind of a big healing moment, because before that, we'd been in just run and gun turmoil. I hadn't even fallen apart yet. But at that point, I think we were experiencing the comfort of having a home.
Okay. So living this dream life on acreage.
Mm-hmm. We're here. We've returned to the land, man.
What do you think?
Now, 3 years later, or thinking about it then?
I mean, I want to know now. Like, I think thinking of it then is its own story.
It's so
of like,
difficult.
We have returned to the land.
It's difficult to even think about it now because at that point, there had not been the turning point of 2020. That's to our story. 2020 living on the property is as significant as Hurricane Harvey and what it did to our like forceful slowing down. Hurricane Harvey forced us to be present and not just looking ahead to when we were going to live on the property. 2020 forced us to acknowledge God and how he moves and how his ways are better than our ways. And that's like a sermon to unpack is how I feel about it now. But I think the best way to describe how I feel overall was the 2 weeks after we moved here was like a honeymoon. We grocery shopped when we made the big move, when we'd gone to, get everything from our Katie storage unit. We grocery shopped at the Costco there. We didn't have to go anywhere. We brought our refrigerator. We plugged in the refrigerator because we'd been living out of a Yeti cooler for months, just trying to revive it every day with ice. And we unpacked real groceries, not just like prepackaged food.
We didn't live in a Yeti cooler for months.
While you were living here.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's like the 6 weeks, 2 months that you were here with the cooler.
Okay,
yeah.
I thought you were saying like we, the family.
No,
okay, gotcha.
Just a couple
for sure.
weeks.
Sorry.
Yeah. And those 2 weeks were an invitation to just be here, to hear the trees and the wind that blew through the leaves and walk the property and get to know it like the back of our hand. That was 2 weeks of being something that you never do. Like you are not a practice person at appreciating what's going on right around you. You're always eager for what is to come. And this was a time where all of us were very content to be a family together, to be on this property and realize the dream, not even experiencing the full depth of what that could mean. There were no animals here. There was no garden here. We barely had, the deck on the outside of our house. Like this was not fancy bells and whistles. We had not arrived at our, present moment of glory. We had just survived and accomplished something amazing. And then we're able to enjoy it. And I think that's fantastic. If you like this episode, then you can find us at our YouTube channel, Better Together Life, or Bo is on Instagram at Better Together Life, and I'm on Instagram, Kelly, at Better Together Wife.